Hello and welcome to our channel, Cheating Exposed. Today, we're revealing another story to uncover the truth behind the lies. So, let's get started. I'm the guy whose wife made our kids release a wild bunny in the middle of the yard after I advised her to have the kids take it to the bushes to release it safely. A hawk took the bunny right in front of both of our children, 4 and 5 years old at the time. They freaked out on their mother and then came running back to me in tears. Our kids started calling their mother the bunny killer. That name seems apt now, and other people called her that as well after her affair got out. What happened with that poor bunny is ancient history compared to what I have to tell now. I'm speaking as a free man after finishing my divorce a couple of months ago. This is going to be pretty long and complicated, so buckle up. I did show my wife this Reddit post, and she was very angry with me. So much so, it caused a bad fight. After it, I got the silent treatment for another week. I tried to make my kids stop mistreating their mother after the bunny incident, even with being punished by small groundings and timeouts. But the BK nickname kept coming back every time our kids got angry with their mother. My wife let up on her cold shoulder routine after a couple of weeks and conceded she should have listened to me about the bunny and should have taken it to the bushes like I said. She claimed that she just felt like she needed to defend herself because she didn't want to be wrong. I accepted that apology and apologized myself for making the Reddit post. I wanted us to go to marriage counseling, but she refused. She acted like there was nothing wrong with our marriage. I decided not to push the issue further since things were seemingly getting along better. But after a few weeks, my eldest came to me saying she wanted to tell me something. There was another reason why she was so mad at her mother than just the bunny, but she was scared to tell me. I comforted her and told her she could tell me anything. Well, what she said shocked me and changed everything in an instant. She said that for months, Mama had been bringing a man over some Saturdays I was at work and had referred to him as her special friend. She got our kids to keep quiet about it by various means of bribery. But my eldest realized that something was very wrong with it and spent some time working up the courage to tell me. Kids know things and pick up on stuff very quickly. I really dislike it when people dismiss those facts. I had noticed my wife acting a bit differently lately. She had been more short with everyone, especially the kids. I tried talking to her about it when I showed her my first post, and she just went off on me about any little thing she could think of. She insulted my appearance, my character, my habits, and even my side of the family. She even brought up that I used to smoke, though I quit over 10 years ago. Then she resorted to locking me out of our bedroom and crying so loudly you could hear it all over the house. So when my eldest came to me, I ended up putting 2 and 2 together. She was cheating, and her behavior was very similar to the mood swings she had while pregnant with both of our children. Similar, I say, because it was even worse. From what I've gathered from searching online and talking to friends and even a counselor, my wife was both very moody from hormones and projecting because of her infidelity. I can't claim to be an expert in psychology, but it does seem to make sense. I wanted it all to be a misunderstanding, but I quickly ordered and set up a few hidden cameras without anyone knowing. I had them delivered to my work so no one at home would see them. Then I set them up on a day my wife went out to have a girls' night with her friends. It was very easy to hook them up and connect them to the Wi-Fi. In just a few short hours, I could monitor every part of the house from my home PC, laptop, and work PC. At first, I worried I might have been going overboard. I thought if it turned out I was wrong, I could remove the cameras and no one would ever know. But no, my worst fears were confirmed as I got plenty of evidence in just the first week. The man my wife had taken as an affair partner was a former colleague of hers. I remembered him quite well, as they seemed close whenever I met him at various functions. My wife quit her job years ago to be a full-time mom after getting pregnant with our first. It was a mutual decision for us both at the time. My wife stayed connected with her former co-workers as they were her best friends, but not anymore. What I'm about to tell you has pretty much made her hated by everyone. Firstly, the AP is younger than my wife by about a decade. She mentored him at her former job to fill her position when she left, and the two of them stayed close. Very close. My wife and I are both over 40, but you wouldn't know it from looking at her. She's positively stunning and got mistaken for someone in their 20s quite a lot. I guess she capitalized on that. I ended up confiding in my sister about what was going on and showed her the footage from the nanny cams. She told me she'd suspected for a while and said she'd seen my wife once at a local bar getting a bit too close with a man that wasn't me. But they never kissed or anything while she was watching, just lots of touching on the shoulders and lower back. Since she wasn't sure, she didn't tell me sooner. I ended up ordering a GPS tracker as well, and after I got it working, I hid it in the trunk of my wife's car. My sister and her husband agreed to help me and followed the tracker on my wife's next supposed night out with friends. She went to a completely different place, 20 miles further away than where she usually goes. And from there, she met up with the AP. My sister and brother-in-law observed my wife and her AP from their car. They noticed him rubbing her belly while they talked and recorded video of it. When I saw the footage, my heart sank. The mood swings, the belly rubbing, it all pointed to one thing: she was pregnant, and it wasn't my baby. My sister and BAL had to calm me down because I completely broke down. I wanted to drown my sorrows in alcohol, but my sister stepped in and told me that drinking would only make things worse. She was right. Later, I decided to take some leave from work, but told my wife I'd be going on a business trip instead. When I told her, she didn't even try to hide her excitement about me leaving. Who is this woman? This wasn't the woman I married nearly 20 years ago. Did someone who looks just like her take her place? Is this some sci-fi pod person situation? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I realized trying to make sense of her betrayal would only drive me insane. Before leaving, I set up cameras all over the house. My sister and BAL agreed to take the kids for a few days since they love visiting their aunt and uncle in the city. With the kids out of the house, my wife had the freedom she wanted. Just hours after I left, she called her AP, and he was over by that evening to spend the night. I won't go into detail about what they did in my home. You can fill in those blanks yourself. But on top of everything else, they joked about me non-stop. They openly discussed their baby and how they needed a plan before her belly started to show. By that point, she was already over 3 months along, and there'd be no way to pass it off as mine since AP is a different race from me. It would be obvious from birth. AP expressed concern about what they do, but my wife brushed it off, saying they had plenty of time to figure it out. Then she shamelessly admitted that this wasn't even her first affair. She confessed to having slept with another man when she was 29. She told AP she was tired of acting like the perfect housewife and sick of being with a boring man like me who, according to her, made her feel old. The only reason she stayed with me was because of my financial stability. When AP asked what she planned to do about our kids, her response floored me: he can have them. She admitted she didn't want to be around the kids anymore because she thought they liked me more. Besides, she was about to have her do-over babyer with AP. I was watching all this unfold from a motel room. I was so disgusted that I nearly threw my laptop across the room. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. I had a couple of beers, grabbed dinner at a nearby diner, and tried to distract myself with a movie. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything. I thought I knew my wife so well. I loved her. I would have done anything for her. But some people are just evil, and you never truly see their real selves until they decide to show you. By the time morning came, I knew exactly what I needed to do: destroy her in the divorce. I'm usually a calm and kind man, but when pushed too far, I can become someone's worst nightmare. That morning, I visited a reputable law firm and asked for the most aggressive divorce lawyer they had. Thankfully, I live in an at-fault state, and my wife's affair was fully documented on camera. At first, the lawyer seemed hesitant about how quickly I wanted to move forward. But once I explained my situation and showed him some of the video footage, his demeanor changed completely. He got a devilish grin, extended his hand, and said, "This is exactly the kind of case I love digging my teeth into." We shook hands, and he assured me he'd get started immediately. My wife had no idea what was coming for her. I had my wife served a few weeks later while I was working from home, and the kids were in school, our eldest in kindergarten and the youngest in preschool. The papers were handed to her directly by the local sheriff, and the whole scene was caught on my cameras. She looked scared as she opened the envelope, read the contents, and then completely lost her composure. She stormed into my office, screaming at me. I, however, stayed cool and calm throughout. By that point, I was mentally checked out of our marriage. She wanted to argue, but I simply told her I had made up my mind and that I wanted her out of the house. After all, I was the only one who had ever paid into the mortgage. She screamed that I couldn't do this to her, and then threatened to spread rumors that I was abusive and try to get me fired from my job. I calmly told her to go ahead and say whatever she wanted, it wouldn't help her. After all, I knew she was already planning to betray me, given that she was pregnant with her affair partner's baby. Her eyes went wide, and she asked how much I knew. I just said, "Enough." Then, once again, I told her to leave. She refused, insisting it was as much her house as mine, and locked herself in the bedroom. Through the cameras, I saw her having a meltdown before pulling out her phone to call the police. Despite her acting like she was panicking, there was a huge smile on her face as she made the call. She was quite the actress. Honestly, I might have believed her performance if I hadn't already known the truth. When the police arrived, I was waiting with the front door wide open and invited them in. Initially, they were fired up, prepared for some kind of domestic altercation. But the house was spotless, and there were no signs of any conflict. My wife ran out of the bedroom crying, grabbed one of the officers by his vest, and called me a maniac. I calmly asked one of the other officers to review evidence I had on my laptop, and he agreed. My wife's face dropped. She hadn't realized I'd recorded her. I showed the officer footage from the cameras, starting with her saying she'd make up lies to ruin me. Then, I showed her running out of my office and into the bedroom, followed by her call to the police where she blatantly lied. The recordings were from multiple angles, and there was no evidence of me hitting her as she'd claimed. I even handed the police a thumb drive containing all the footage for their records. Despite being caught red-handed, my wife clung to her story, claiming the recordings were illegal and inadmissible. But I pointed out that they were legal since they came from security cameras inside my own home. At that point, she turned to the police, pleading for them to do something. And they did. She was the one placed in handcuffs. She started crying hysterically, but didn't resist much, probably because she knew that would lead to even more charges. I just sat there, shaking my head. This was the woman I had loved for so many years. Once, I thought she was wonderful, intelligent, and endearing. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the police took her away, she screamed that they couldn't do this to her, but her cries were ignored. Afterward, I shut down all her credit cards in my name and stopped any future deposits into our joint bank account. From then on, she was left to rely on her own money, which she'd saved plenty of during her working years while I paid the mortgage. She eventually came back to collect her car, which I had already packed with a few suitcases of her clothes and personal items. I left the key on the seat. She couldn't even step back inside the house. My wife's parents came to talk to me a day after she bailed herself out of jail. Initially, they only knew the twisted version of events she told them, which was the same story she had tried to feed the police. Her father, a big, strong man despite his age, was especially furious and seemed ready to confront me. But when I calmly asked him if he was aware of my wife's affair or her pregnancy, his demeanor shifted. He looked surprised and gave me the chance to explain myself. I brought out my laptop again and showed my in-laws the recordings. Once they saw the truth, they were horrified. They couldn't believe that this was their daughter. They apologized to me profusely and assured me they'd stay in touch to help with my kids. Right then and there, they called my wife on speakerphone and confronted her about her lies. At first, she tried to stick to her story, but when they told her they were with me and had seen the recordings, her tone changed. They told her they knew everything and that they wanted her out of their house immediately. She tried to backpedal, but they were having none of it. Her father firmly told her that they didn't raise her to be a selfish, deceitful person who would try to frame her own husband. He even called her a selfish adulteress, which adjusted language. Then they disowned her on the spot. My mother-in-law was crying as they hung up on her mid-sentence. My wife tried calling them back repeatedly, but they ignored every attempt. When my in-laws returned home later, they found she had already left, but not before destroying several things in their house. My mother-in-law was heartbroken, in tears over the damage. Despite everything, I still consider my ex-wife's parents my in-laws. They've been supportive and continue to visit from time to time to see their grandchildren. But as far as we're all concerned, my ex-wife is essentially dead to us. A little while later, my wife came back with her affair partner, AP, to collect her remaining belongings. AP refused to step inside the house, staying near his car, while my wife silently packed her things. She didn't say a word to me, knowing the house was full of cameras and that any misstep could land her in even more trouble. I wasn't alone either. My sister and brother-in-law, BIL, were there to help keep an eye on her. BIL watched AP through the window the entire time. Things became tense when my kids came home. My wife didn't even acknowledge them, not even when our youngest started crying for her. She continued packing in silence, her face emotionless. Before leaving, she spitefully took a few framed wedding photos off the wall, smashed them on the floor, and glanced at me, seemingly expecting a reaction. But I stayed calm and said nothing. When she realized she wouldn't get a rise out of me, she grabbed her last bag and walked out the door without another word. After she left, I realized I couldn't handle everything on my own. I had to call my elderly mother to come stay with me for a while. I didn't have enough time off work or adequate daycare options for the kids. For peace of mind, I also ordered DNA tests for my children. While I was confident they were mine, several people advised me to confirm. Thankfully, both children are biologically mine. I also got tested for STIs, and thankfully, I'm clean. So, no worries there. About a week later, my wife showed up at my door unexpectedly. She said she'd agree to a clean divorce if I agreed to, essentially meaning she'd get half of everything. I told her no to her face. The conversation turned into an argument, during which she more or less admitted that she'd researched the law in our state and realized it wasn't in her favor. We had met, gotten engaged, married, and lived our entire lives in this state. She knew there was no way to avoid taking a major loss unless I agreed to settle, which I refused to do. I told her she had betrayed me, our kids, her parents, and everyone else who cared about her by having an affair. Then I slammed the door in her face. She left quietly, and I didn't see her again until we were in court. A few months later, we faced each other in divorce court. By that time, my wife was visibly pregnant, and she had a lawyer with her. Her affair partner, AP, however, was nowhere to be seen. I expected her to lie to the judge. She tried a few times, but I had enough video evidence to counter every single falsehood. She quickly realized she didn't have much of a case. Instead of lying, she started dragging out the divorce by refusing to cooperate and making endless demands. She wanted a significant chunk of my savings, a list of my personal belongings, and for me to buy her out of her half of the house, despite the fact that she had never contributed financially to it. On my end, I pushed for full custody of the kids and to have her name removed from the house deed. I had video proof of her saying she didn't care about the kids anymore and even talking about making up lies. She continued to stall and kept changing her demands, but the judge wasn't having it. Since this is an at-fault state, her infidelity left her entitled to very little. The fact that she tried to frame me only made her case worse. In the end, she lost custody of the kids entirely and walked away with only her personal belongings, a modest financial settlement, fair given the circumstances, and the car I had bought for her years ago. The car title was in my name, but I signed it over without a second thought just to get everything over with. Throughout the entire divorce process, she made no attempts to contact or speak with our children. Because of this, I was granted full custody, and the house is now entirely mine. I'm completely free of her. After the divorce, my ex-wife continued to spread lies about me, but my sister made sure the truth got out. Once our mutual friends learned about her infidelity, they cut ties with her completely. Not long after, my ex and her AP left town. I heard AP wasn't fired, but was transferred to another location. I don't know where they went, and I don't care. They could have been sent to freeze in Greenland for all it matters to me. My ex should have had her do-over baby by now, and I hope it was worth it to her. This isn't what I thought I'd be posting on Reddit after originally sharing a story about my wife releasing a bunny where a hawk could get it. But reading the comments back then opened my eyes to how many red flags I had been ignoring for years. I guess I kept those rose-tinted glasses on for far too long. It's all over now. To anyone who made it through this post, thank you for reading. I know it was a lot, but this has been my life. Final update. I successfully got my ex's name off the house deed, thanks to bank records that clearly showed I was the only one who ever paid into it. This became a key point during the divorce proceedings, especially since we live in an at-fault state. In such states, being a confirmed cheater is like having a signed prenup against you. It's a significant disadvantage. My ex made things even harder for herself by being argumentative with the judge, which didn't help her case. And when I mentioned I got the meanest lawyer at the firm, I wasn't exaggerating. This guy was like a bear and a shark rolled into one, relentlessly tearing apart every weak argument my ex attempted to make. In the end, the payout my ex-wife received was $60,000, along with the car I had bought her a couple of years ago. That car, worth $50,000, was fully paid off, and I willingly transferred the title to her as part of the settlement. Interestingly, she was offered partial custody of our children during the proceedings. However, once the court saw the video where she openly admitted she didn't care about them anymore, her case for custody crumbled. Rather than fight a losing battle, she voluntarily relinquished all parental rights. It became clear that her main focus wasn't on the kids, but on trying to get her way in court. At the end of the day, I'm relieved that the house is solely mine, my kids are safe with me, and I can finally move forward without her looming over our lives. Well, folks, that's all. Thank you all for listening. Please like, comment, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when we upload the next video. Take care.